The freezing currents of the Hudson River do not negotiate, and they certainly do not care if you are rich or poor. When Clara Dawson saw the small body hit the grey water, she didn't think about the cold. She didn't think about her unpaid rent or the tips she was leaving on the table. She definitely didn't know the boy drowning in the murky depths was the only heir to the city's most dangerous criminal empire. All she knew was that everyone else was just watching, frozen in fear, while a child was dying. She jumped. That single splash shattered her invisible life forever. She thought she was saving a boy. In reality, she was diving straight into a war zone. Clara Dawson wiped the grease-stained counter of The Rusty Anchor for the 100th time that afternoon. The diner, perched precariously on the edge of the industrial docks, smelled permanently of stale coffee and diesel fumes. Rain battered against the cracked windows, blurring the view of the grey river, churning violently below. It was a Tuesday, typically the slowest shift of the week, and Clara's tips were currently sitting at a pathetic $12. $12 wouldn't fix the radiator in her apartment. $12 wouldn't pay the mounting medical debt left behind by her late mother. Clara sighed, pushing a stray lock of damp blonde hair behind her ear, her eyes drifting to the window. A black sedan, sleek and out of place among the rusted pickup trucks and delivery vans, idled near the pier railing. Clara frowned. The pier was slippery today, coated in a mix of rainwater and oil. The back door of the sedan opened. A small boy, no older than 7, stepped out. He was dressed in a miniature suit, looking like a little prince lost in a scrapyard. He moved towards the railing, chasing a bright red balloon that had escaped the car. "Hey!" a man's voice shouted from the driver's seat. A large man in a suit scrambled out, but he was too slow. The wind off the water was a physical force today. It caught the balloon, and the boy reached for it. He climbed the bottom rung of the rusted railing, his expensive leather shoes slipping on the wet metal. Clara dropped the coffee pot. It shattered on the floor, hot liquid splashing her ankles, but she was already moving. She sprinted past the few startled customers, slamming her shoulder into the heavy glass door of the diner. She burst out into the rain just as the scream pierced the air. The boy was gone. "Leo!" the driver screamed, his face a mask of pure terror, but he froze at the edge, looking down at the swirling black water. He was paralyzed. Clara didn't freeze. She didn't have the luxury of hesitation. She had grown up swimming in dangerous waters, unlike the suit-wearing bodyguard who looked like he was about to faint. She kicked off her worn-out sneakers while running and vaulted over the railing without breaking stride. The shock of the cold was instant and brutal. It felt like 1,000 needles piercing her skin. The water was murky, tasting of salt and rot. Clara kicked hard, forcing her eyes open in the stinging darkness. There, a flash of white. The boy's shirt. He was sinking fast, thrashing in a panic that was only expending his oxygen faster. The current near the pilings was a killer. It dragged debris down and held it there. Clara stroked harder, her lungs burning. She grabbed the back of the boy's jacket. He flailed, his small elbow striking her in the jaw, nearly knocking her out. She gritted her teeth against the pain, wrapped an arm around his chest, and kicked for the surface. Breaking the surface felt like being born again. Clara gasped, sucking in air mixed with rain, holding the coughing boy's head above the waves. "I got you!" she choked out, treading water against the heavy pull of the tide. "I got you!" The pier was 15 feet above them. There was no way to climb up the slick wooden pilings. "Grab the rope!" a voice bellowed from above. A thick yellow rope dropped down, splashing next to them. Clara didn't have the strength to climb it with the boy. She looped it under the boy's arms, tying a secure knot with trembling fingers. "Pull him up!" she screamed, her voice raw. The bodyguard hauled the boy up with frantic strength. Clara watched until Leo was safely over the railing. Only then did she realize the rope hadn't come back down for her. The current slammed her against a wooden piling, scraping the skin off her shoulder. Panic flared in her chest. Had they forgotten her? "Help!" she cried out, but the wind tore the word away. She saw the bodyguard bundle the boy into the back of the sedan. Then another car screeched to a halt. A massive armored SUV. 4 men jumped out, weapons drawn, scanning the perimeter. They weren't police. They moved with military precision. They shoved the soaking wet bodyguard into the SUV, slammed the doors, and the convoy peeled away, tires screeching on the wet asphalt. Clara was left alone in the freezing river. She had to swim 300 yards downstream to a boat launch ramp, dragging her body through the sludge. By the time she crawled onto the concrete, shivering so violently her teeth chattered like castanets, the diner lights were a distant blur. She was alive. But as she lay on the cold concrete, coughing up river water, Clara had a sinking feeling that drowning might have been the easier option compared to what she had just involved herself in. The walk back to her apartment was a blur of misery. Clara had retrieved her shoes from the pier, but her uniform was ruined, stained with river muck and smelling of dead fish. She had tried to go back into the diner to get her purse, but the manager, a man named Gary with a heart 2 sizes too small, had met her at the door. "You walked out on a shift," Gary had sneered, blocking the entrance. "You broke a coffee pot. And look at you. You're a liability, Dawson." "I saved a kid," Clara shivered, hugging her arms around herself. "You made a scene. Customers left without paying. Don't bother coming back. I'll mail you your last check, minus the coffee pot." He slammed the door in her face. Now, sitting in her studio apartment on 4th Street, Clara stared at the peeling wallpaper. She had wrapped herself in 3 blankets, but the chill was bone deep. She had lost her job. She had no money for rent due in 3 days, and her jaw throbbed where the drowning boy had hit her. "Good job, Clara," she whispered to the empty room. "Real hero." She heated a cup of instant noodles, her dinner, and sat by the window. 4th Street was usually quiet, but tonight the atmosphere felt heavy. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness below. Clara peered through the blinds. A black SUV, identical to the one at the pier, was idling directly in front of her building. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Maybe they were looking for witnesses. Maybe the police finally came. But there were no flashing lights, no sirens, just the ominous, silent hum of a high-end engine. A heavy knock on her door made her jump, spilling hot broth on her hand. Clara didn't answer. She grabbed a small paring knife from the counter, her only weapon. "Miss Dawson!" A deep voice resonated through the cheap wood of the door. It wasn't a question. "Open the door." "Who are you?" Clara asked, her voice trembling but loud. "I'll call the police. We aren't here to hurt you, but we aren't leaving without you. Open the door, or we will remove it." Clara looked at the deadbolt. It was flimsy. If they wanted in, they would get in. She took a breath, hid the knife in the back pocket of her jeans, and unlocked the door. 2 men stood in the hallway. They were dressed in charcoal suits that cost more than her life's earnings. The one who had spoken was older, with graying hair and a scar running through his left eyebrow. His name, though she didn't know it yet, was Silas, the head of security for the Sterling family. "Clara Dawson?" Silas asked. "Yes. You were at the pier today. You went into the water." "I saved a boy," Clara said defensively. "Is he okay?" Silas didn't smile. His eyes were cold, assessing her like she was a threat. "That remains to be seen. You need to come with us. I'm not going anywhere with you." Silas stepped forward. He didn't touch her, but his presence filled the small room. "Let me rephrase. The father of the boy you pulled out of the river would like to have a word with you. And Adrian Sterling does not handle rejection well." Clara's blood ran cold. The name Sterling wasn't just a name in this city, it was a law. Adrian Sterling owned the shipping yards, the construction firms, and half the politicians. Rumors whispered of other things he owned, things that happened in the shadows, things involving guns and disappearances. "The boy? That was Sterling's son?" she whispered. "Get your coat, Miss Dawson." Clara realized she had no choice. She grabbed her damp coat. As she walked between the 2 men down the stairs, she felt the weight of the knife in her pocket. It felt like a toy. The ride was silent. They drove out of the cramped city streets, heading towards the secluded hills of North Shore, where the estates were hidden behind iron gates and high walls. The car slowed as it approached a massive wrought-iron gate. A security camera buzzed, turning to focus on the driver. The gates swung open. The Sterling estate looked less like a home and more like a fortress. Stone walls, dark windows, and patrolling guards with German shepherds. They pulled up to the main entrance. Silas opened her door. "Leave the knife in the car," Silas said quietly as she stepped out. Clara froze. She hadn't shown it to anyone. "We knew it was there before you opened your apartment door," Silas added, his tone bored. "Inside. The boss is waiting in the library." Clara left the knife. She walked up the marble steps, her sneakers squeaking on the pristine stone. She was wet, poor, and terrified, walking into the lion's den. She had saved the cub, but she had no idea if the lion was grateful or hungry. The interior of the mansion was suffocatingly opulent. Dark mahogany wood, Persian rugs that silenced footsteps, and the faint scent of expensive scotch and old paper. Clara kept her head down, following Silas through a labyrinth of corridors. They stopped before double oak doors. Silas knocked once, then pushed them open. "Sir, Miss Dawson." The library was dim, lit only by the fire crackling in the massive stone hearth. One wall was entirely glass, overlooking the city lights below, a view that said, "I own all of this." A man stood by the window, his back to them. He was tall, his shoulders broad under a black dress shirt. He held a tumbler of amber liquid in one hand. "Leave us," the man said. His voice was low, smooth, like velvet wrapped around a razor blade. Silas nodded and backed out, closing the door with a soft click. Clara stood alone in the center of the room. Her hands were shaking, so she clasped them behind her back. The man turned around. Adrian Sterling was devastatingly handsome, in a way that set off alarm bells in Clara's brain. He had sharp, angular jawlines, hair as black as the river water, and eyes of piercing, icy blue. He didn't look like a thug. He looked like a king. But the coldness in his eyes was terrifying. He didn't speak immediately. He walked toward her, slow and predatory. He stopped 3 feet away, inspecting her. He looked at her cheap, damp clothes, her messy hair, the bruise forming on her jaw. "So," Adrian said, swirling his drink, "you are the one." I just saw him fall," Clara stammered. "Did you?" Adrian placed his glass on a side table with a sharp clink. "Or were you waiting?" Clara blinked, confused. "What?" "My son, Leo. He is surrounded by the best security money can buy. Yet on the one day his primary detail is switched, he falls into the river. And miraculously, a waitress, who was a state champion swimmer in high school according to her file, happens to be watching and ready to jump." Adrian took a step closer, towering over her. "Who paid you, Miss Dawson? Was it the Russians? Or perhaps Victor Hale?" Clara stepped back, anger flaring through her fear. "Are you insane? I lost my job today because of this. I swallowed half the Hudson River. I didn't know who your kid was, and I wish I still didn't." Adrian's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. He wasn't used to being yelled at. "You expect me to believe you risked your life for a stranger?" "It was a child," Clara shouted. "I don't care whose child it is. If you see a kid drowning, you jump. That's what human beings do. Maybe you forgot that in your castle up here." The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian stared at her, searching for a lie in her eyes. He saw the genuine indignation, the exhaustion, the fear. Suddenly the library door creaked open again. A small voice broke the tension. "Daddy?" Adrian's demeanor shattered instantly. The cold mask dropped, replaced by raw, desperate parental concern. He spun around. Leo stood in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, looking pale and small. A nurse stood behind him, looking apologetic. "Leo," Adrian breathed, dropping to one knee. "You should be resting." Leo ignored his father and looked past him, pointing a small finger at Clara. "That's her," Leo said softly. "That's the lady from the water. The bad man pushed me, Daddy." But she caught me. The air left the room. Adrian froze. He looked at his son, then slowly turned his head to look at Clara. The accusation in his eyes was gone, replaced by a dark, swirling realization. "The bad man pushed you?" Adrian asked, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Which man, Leo?" "The driver," Leo whispered. "Mr. Cale. He said I had to go for a swim." Clara covered her mouth. The driver, the man who had screamed, the man who had looked paralyzed. He hadn't been paralyzed by fear. He had been waiting for the boy to die. Adrian stood up slowly. A darkness radiated off him that made the previous interrogation feel like a tea party. He walked over to his desk and pressed a button on the intercom. "Silas." "Yes, sir?" "Cale, he is not to leave the holding cell. And bring me my tools." "Understood, sir." Adrian turned back to Clara. The suspicion was gone, but the intensity remained. He walked over to her, and for the first time, he looked at her not as a threat, but as something else. Something valuable. "You saved him," Adrian said, his voice rough. "You saved him when my own men tried to kill him." I just did what I had to do," Clara whispered. "You have enemies now, Clara Dawson," Adrian said, using her name with a strange weight. "Cale wasn't working alone. Whoever ordered the hit on my son knows you saved him. They saw you. They likely have photos of you." Clara's knees buckled. "What are you saying?" Adrian caught her by the arm to steady her. His grip was firm, warm. "I am saying you cannot go back to your apartment. You cannot go back to your life. You are a loose end to my enemies, and a savior to my family." He looked her dead in the eye. "You are under my protection now, whether you like it or not." The guest room Clara woke up in was larger than her entire apartment building. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, the curtains were heavy velvet, and the silence was absolute. For a moment she forgot. She stretched, thinking about her shift at the diner, before the memories of the freezing river and the gun-toting guards came crashing back. She scrambled out of bed, finding a set of clean clothes folded on a chair, cashmere joggers, and a soft t-shirt. They fit perfectly. Too perfectly. It made her skin crawl to think Adrian Sterling knew her size. She opened the door and found the hallway empty, though she knew cameras were watching. She wandered down the grand staircase, following the scent of coffee. She found the kitchen, a pristine expanse of marble and stainless steel. A stout woman with grey hair pinned into a tight bun was chopping fruit. "Good morning, dear," the woman said without turning around. "I'm Martha, housekeeper. Mr. Sterling is in the gym. Leo is with his tutor. Eat." She slid a plate of eggs and fruit toward Clara. Clara stared at it. "I'm not hungry. I want to leave." Martha finally turned, her face kind but firm. "The gate requires a code, dear, and the guards don't have a sense of humor. Eat the eggs." Clara ate quickly, fueling up for a fight. She needed answers, and she needed to go home. She found the gym in the west wing. It was a glass-walled room overlooking the manicured grounds. Adrian was there, shirtless, hitting a heavy bag with terrifying force. Sweat slicked his skin, highlighting scars that mapped a history of violence across his back and ribs. He stopped as she entered, catching the heavy bag with one hand to silence it. He didn't look winded. "You slept late," Adrian said, grabbing a towel. "I want to go home," Clara stated, crossing her arms. "I appreciate the dry clothes and the hospitality. But I have a life. I have bills." Adrian walked over to a wall-mounted monitor. He tapped the screen, bringing up a news feed. "Watch." Clara stepped closer. The headline on the local news channel read, "Suspicious fire guts, 4th Street apartment complex." Clara's breath hitched. The camera panned over a blackened shell of a building. Her building. "No," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Mrs. Higgins. My neighbor." The building was evacuated. "No casualties," Adrian said, his voice void of emotion. "But your apartment is gone. Everything you own is ash." Clara felt the room spin. Her mother's photo albums, her few pieces of jewelry, her life. Why? She croaked. Because they went looking for you, Adrian said, stepping closer, his heat radiating toward her. Cale talked before he expired. He told his handler that a girl interfered. They went to scrub the witness. If you had been there last night, you would be dead. Clara looked up at him, tears stinging her eyes. Who are they? Victor Hale. Adrian spat the name like a curse. A rival who thinks he can take my territory by killing my heir. He knows you saved Leo. To him, that makes you a player in the game. And in our world, players get eliminated. I'm not a player. I'm a waitress, Clara shouted, pushing against his chest. It was like pushing a brick wall. Adrian caught her wrists. His grip was gentle but unbreakable. Not anymore. You are a target, which means you stay here. I have a team clearing out a wing for you. You will be Leo's companion. I'm not a nanny. No, you are his savior. He trusts you. He hasn't spoken a word since the accident until he saw you last night. You stay, you live, you leave, you die. It is a simple equation. Clara pulled her hands away, trembling. For how long? Until I burn Victor Hale's empire to the ground, Adrian said darkly. However long that takes. Later that afternoon, Clara sat in the library, staring blankly at a book. A small shadow fell over the page. She looked up to see Leo. He was holding a drawing. He held it out to her. It was a crayon drawing of a stick-figure boy in blue water and a stick-figure girl with yellow hair pulling him out. Above the girl, he had drawn a golden halo. It's you, Leo whispered. Clara's heart, which had been hardened by fear and anger all morning, cracked open. She took the drawing. Thank you, Leo. It's beautiful. Leo climbed onto the sofa next to her, resting his head against her arm. He didn't say anything else, but the trust was absolute. From the doorway, Adrian watched them. He had intended to use Clara as bait, a piece on the board to lure Hale out. But seeing her with his son, seeing the fierce protectiveness in her eyes despite her fear, something shifted in his chest, a dangerous feeling. He wasn't just protecting a witness anymore. He was protecting her. 3 days passed. The tension in the house was palpable. Adrian was gone most of the time, waging a silent war in the city streets, while Clara stayed with Leo. They built forts, read stories, and for a few hours a day, the mansion didn't feel like a prison. On the 4th evening, Silas entered Clara's room carrying a garment bag. Mr. Sterling requests your presence downstairs in 1 hour, Silas said. Tell him I'm busy, Clara said, not looking up from her book. He said to tell you that tonight is not a request, it is a maneuver. Clara sighed and unzipped the bag. Inside was a dress that cost more than her education. It was a deep, blood-red silk, floor-length, with a slit up the thigh and a back that plunged dangerously low. When she descended the stairs an hour later, the foyer went silent. Adrian was waiting at the bottom, adjusting his cufflinks. He wore a tuxedo that was tailored to perfection, making him look like the lethal aristocrat he was. He looked up, and his hands stilled. His eyes traveled from her heels up the curve of her hips, lingering on the exposed skin of her back, before meeting her eyes. For a second, the mask slipped. There was hunger there, raw and unchecked. Red, Adrian murmured as she reached the bottom step. A bold choice. You bought it, Clara retorted, though her heart was hammering. Where are we going? The chaotic charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum. Adrian offered her his arm. Victor Hale will be there. He thinks I am weak. He thinks I am hiding, tending to a traumatized son. I need to show him I am untouched. And why am I here? Because if Hale sees you on my arm, alive and well, it sends a message. It tells him that I protect what is mine, and that his attempts failed. I am not yours, Clara whispered fiercely. Adrian leaned in, his lips grazing her ear. Tonight you are. Play the part, Clara. For your safety, and for Leo's. The gala was a sea of diamonds, champagne, and fake smiles. The air smelled of expensive perfume and betrayal. As they walked in, Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like a wave. Who is she? Is that Sterling? I thought his son was dead. Adrian kept a hand on the small of her back, his touch branding her skin. He guided her through the sharks, introducing her simply as Clara, leaving the rest to their imagination. "Adrian!" a voice boomed. The crowd parted. A man approached. He was older, with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his reptilian eyes. He held a cane he clearly didn't need. "Victor," Adrian nodded, his body tensing imperceptibly against Clara's. "I heard about the accident at the river," Victor Hale said, his eyes sliding over Clara with slimy familiarity. "Terrible business. How is young Leo?" "Leo is excellent," Adrian lied smoothly. "He is taking swimming lessons. He finds the water refreshing." Victor's smile faltered. He looked at Clara. "And who is this lovely creature?" "New staff." "Clara is the reason my son is alive," Adrian said, his voice dropping an octave, turning deadly. "And she is under my personal protection. I assume you know what that entails, Victor." Victor chuckled, but it was a dry, hollow sound. "Of course, the Sterling protection is legendary. Though accidents happen to everyone, Adrian. Even pretty little heroes." "Not while I breathe," Adrian said. The music swelled. A waltz. "Dance with me," Adrian commanded, pulling Clara onto the floor before she could protest. He pulled her close, chest to chest. They moved seamlessly together. Clara felt the hard muscle beneath his jacket, the gun holstered under his arm. "He threatened me," Clara whispered, looking over Adrian's shoulder at Victor, who was watching them like a hawk. "He's trying to scare you. Don't let him." "I am scared, Adrian. You people are monsters." "Yes," Adrian agreed, spinning her. "We are. But I am the monster that is on your side. Look at me." She looked up. His blue eyes were intense, hypnotic. "I will not let him touch you," Adrian vowed. "Whatever you think of me, know this. I pay my debts. You saved my blood. I will spill oceans of it for you." The intensity of the moment stole her breath. For a second, the danger faded, and there was only the heat of his hand on her waist, the scent of his cologne, and the magnetic pull between them. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was the queen on the chessboard, and the king was holding her tight. "Adrian," she breathed, her guard dropping. Suddenly Silas's voice crackled in Adrian's earpiece, loud enough for Clara to hear the tinny sound. "Sir, we have a problem. The valet just found a device under the limo, and we have bogies at the east exit." Adrian stopped dancing. The romantic haze vanished, replaced by the soldier. "We're leaving," he said. "Now." They exited through the kitchen, avoiding the main paparazzi line. Silas met them at the loading dock with a different car, a nondescript grey sedan, armoured, plated. Hale moved fast, Silas grunted, tossing Adrian an assault rifle. Adrian checked the magazine and placed it between the front seats. Clara climbed into the back, her heart thumping against her ribs like a trapped bird. I thought the gala was safe territory. "There is no safe territory," Adrian said, climbing into the driver's seat. "Hold on." He gunned the engine, tearing out of the loading dock. They hit the highway, rain lashing against the windshield. For 10 minutes it was quiet. Then headlights appeared in the rear-view mirror. 3 cars, no lights on top, just high beams blinding them. "Get down!" Adrian roared. Bullets shattered the rear window, spiderwebbing the reinforced glass but not penetrating. Clara screamed, throwing herself onto the floorboards, covering her head. Adrian swerved violently, clipping a sedan that tried to pull alongside them. Metal screeched against metal, sparks flying in the rain. "Silas, take the right flank!" Adrian yelled into his comms. Silas, in a chase car behind them, rammed one of the attackers, sending it spinning into the guardrail in a ball of fire. But 2 more cars were closing in. A man leaned out of the sunroof of the lead pursuer, leveling a submachine gun. "Take the wheel!" Adrian shouted to the empty passenger seat, then cursed, realizing Clara was in the back. "Clara, climb up, now!" "What? I need to shoot. You need to steer. Clara scrambled through the gap between the seats, her red dress tearing on the center console. She grabbed the steering wheel, her hands slick with sweat. Keep it steady, Adrian ordered. He rolled down his window, the wind and rain roaring into the cabin. He leaned out, aiming the rifle with one hand while keeping a foot on the gas. Bang, bang, bang. Adrian fired with terrifying precision. The front tire of the pursuing SUV blew out. The vehicle flipped, tumbling end over end across the highway. I did it! Clara yelled, hysteria bubbling in her throat. Eyes on the road! Adrian snapped. They were approaching a bridge. The last pursuing car, a heavy truck, rammed them from behind. The sedan spun. Clara screamed as the world turned into a blur of lights and rain. The car slammed into the concrete barrier of the bridge. The airbags deployed with a deafening punch of dust and force. Silence. Clara coughed, waving away the white powder. Adrian? Adrian was groaning, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. He shook his head, clearing the daze. Out! We have to get out. The fuel line. He kicked his door open. He dragged Clara out of the passenger side just as the truck that hit them screeched to a halt 20 yards back. 4 men got out, guns drawn. Jump, Adrian commanded, looking over the side of the bridge. Below, the riverbank was muddy and steep, leading into the woods. Are you crazy? Do you want to die, Clara? He didn't wait. He grabbed her hand and pulled. They tumbled down the steep embankment, sliding through mud, thorns tearing at Clara's expensive dress. Shots rang out above them, bullets thudding into the dirt inches from their feet. They sprinted into the dense tree line. Adrian moved with a limp, but he didn't slow down. He navigated the dark woods like a wolf. They ran until Clara's lungs burned and her legs gave out. They collapsed inside an abandoned, rotting boat shed near the water's edge. It smelled of mold and gasoline. Adrian slammed the door shut and barred it with a rusted pipe. He slid down the wall, clutching his side. His tuxedo shirt was soaked in blood, not just from the cut on his head. He had taken a bullet in the side during the crash. You're shot! Clara gasped, crawling toward him. Grazed, Adrian gritted out, though his face was pale. I've had worse. Let me see. Clara pushed his hands away. It was a nasty gash, bleeding sluggishly. She didn't hesitate. She ripped the long slit of her silk dress, tearing off a large strip of red fabric. This is going to hurt, she warned. Do it. She bound the wound tight. Adrian hissed in pain, his head falling back against the wood. He watched her working in the dim moonlight filtering through the cracks. She was covered in mud, her hair wild, her dress ruined, binding his wounds with hands that were steady despite the terror. You drive well, he whispered, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Clara sat back, her hands bloody. I drove a taxi for a summer. In Queens. They sat in silence for a moment, the adrenaline fading, leaving only the cold and the reality of their situation. Why are they trying so hard? Clara asked softly. Is it just business? Adrian closed his eyes. No, it's not just business. Victor Hale, he blames me for his daughter's death. She died in a crossfire 5 years ago. He wants to take everything I love. He wants me to feel what it's like to be the last one standing. He opened his eyes and looked at her. That's why I can't let you go, Clara. Not anymore. Because I'm a witness. No. Adrian reached out, his rough hand cupping her cheek, smearing a streak of mud on her skin. Because when the car spun, my first thought wasn't for my empire. It wasn't even for myself. It was that I hadn't thanked you yet, and that I couldn't bear the thought of that red dress being the last thing you wore. Clara's heart stopped. The gap between them vanished. The danger outside didn't matter. The millionaire mob boss and the waitress sat on the dirty floor of a boat shed, bound by blood and a night that had changed everything. We have to survive this, Clara whispered, leaning into his touch. We will, Adrian promised. But there is something you need to know. The men on the bridge. I recognized one of them. Who? He doesn't work for Victor Hale. Adrian's voice turned to ice. He works for my brother. Clara stared at him. Your brother? Julian. I thought he was in Europe. I thought we were at peace. Adrian struggled to sit up, fury overtaking the pain. The call is coming from inside the house, Clara. Hale is just the distraction. My own blood is coming for the throne. Rain hammered relentlessly against the roof of the nondescript delivery van as it sped down the slick asphalt of Route 9. Inside the cargo hold, the air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and the smell of wet earth. Adrian Sterling sat propped against the metal wall, his face pale and beaded with sweat, his hand pressed firmly against the makeshift bandage on his side. The bullet wound was stable, but he had lost blood, and his legendary stamina was fraying at the edges. Silas drove with white-knuckled precision, his eyes darting between the rear-view mirror and the dark road ahead. He was a man who rarely felt fear. But tonight, the odds were catastrophic. We are 20 minutes from the private airfield, Silas called out from the front, his voice grave. The pilot is prepped. Flight plan filed for Paris under the alias DuPont. Adrian nodded weakly and turned his gaze to Clara. She was huddled in the corner, wrapped in a coarse wool blanket Silas had thrown at them. Her red dress was ruined, shredded by thorns and stained with mud, but her eyes were alert, watching him with an intensity that unnerved him. You will go to Paris, Adrian said, his voice rough but commanding. Silas has accounts set up. You'll never have to work again. You'll be safe. Clara stared at him, disbelief warring with anger. You're sending me away. I am sending you to live, Adrian corrected, shifting his leg and wincing. Roman has taken the house. He has the men, the weapons, and the element of surprise. I am going back to a slaughter. There is no reason for you to be collateral damage twice in 1 week. And what about Leo? Clara asked, her voice cutting through the hum of the engine. Silas will get you out. Then he will extract Leo, Adrian lied. He lied poorly. They both knew that if Adrian died tonight, Leo wouldn't survive until sunrise. Roman couldn't afford to leave the true heir alive if he wanted the Sterling Empire. Clara moved. She didn't crawl away. She crawled toward him. She knelt on the dirty metal floor, ignoring the sway of the van. She reached out and took Adrian's cold hand in hers. You are a terrible liar, Adrian Sterling, she whispered. You're going to die in that house, and once you're gone, Roman won't stop looking for me. I'm the loose end. I saw his face. I saw the driver. Paris isn't far enough. Clara. No, she interrupted, her voice gaining steel. I didn't jump into the Hudson River to save a boy just to let his father die in a suicide mission. You said I was under your protection. Well, right now, you look like you need mine. Adrian looked at her. Really looked at her. He saw the waitress who scraped by on tips, the woman who dove into freezing water, the survivor who drove a getaway car through gunfire. She wasn't a damsel. She was a partner. The delivery entrance, Clara said, her mind working fast, recalling the layout from the gala. I saw the trucks coming in and out while I was waiting for you. The guards don't check the laundry vans properly. They just wave them through. It's the weak point. Adrian's eyes narrowed, the strategic gears in his mind turning, despite the pain. It's a long shot. If they check the back, then we fight, Clara said simply. But we do it together. Silas watched them in the rearview mirror. Sir, we just passed a clean right linen truck parked at the diner up the road. Drivers inside getting coffee. Adrian looked at Clara, then at his loyal head of security. He took a deep breath, the pain in his side sharpening his focus. Turn around, Silas, Adrian commanded. We need a truck. The plan was madness, born of desperation. 20 minutes later, Silas was behind the wheel of the stolen laundry truck, wearing the driver's cap pulled low. Adrian was buried beneath a pile of dirty gala tablecloths in the back, his rifle clutched to his chest. Clara sat in the passenger seat, wearing a stolen, oversized windbreaker, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The approach to the Sterling estate was a gauntlet of tension. The iron gates loomed out of the mist, guarded by 2 men holding submachine guns. These weren't Adrian's men. They were mercenaries, hired muscle brought in by Roman to secure his coup. The truck slowed to a halt. The window rolled down. "Delivery," Silas grunted, holding up a clipboard he had found on the dashboard. "Late pickup. Boss wants the linens gone before the morning briefing." The guard shone a flashlight into the cab. The beam hit Clara's face. She didn't flinch. She looked bored, chewing a piece of gum she didn't have. "Who's the girl?" the guard asked suspiciously. "New hire, trainee," Silas said, sounding annoyed. "Look, buddy, I just want to finish this shift. You want to check the dirty laundry in the back? Be my guest. It smells like champagne and vomit." The guard wrinkled his nose, glancing at the rain pouring down. He didn't want to get wet. He didn't want to sort through dirty sheets. "Go ahead," the guard waved them through. "Make it quick." The truck rolled forward. Clara let out a breath she had been holding for a lifetime. They parked at the rear loading dock, concealed by the shadows of the service wing. Silas moved to the back, helping Adrian out from under the linens. Adrian stumbled, his face grey, but his eyes were burning with a lethal coldness. "Kitchen is clear," Adrian whispered, checking the feed on his phone. He had managed to hack back into the internal localized network, though the main security grid was locked out. "They are all in the library, celebrating." "How many?" Silas asked, checking his weapon. 6 guards, plus Roman, plus Victor Hale. 8 against 2, Silas noted grimly. 2.5, Clara corrected, grabbing a heavy brass candlestick from a hallway table. Adrian almost smiled. "Clara, listen to me. The library has a service corridor that runs behind the west wall. It leads to the breaker box for the main wing. If things go south, I cut the lights," she finished. "Exactly. Stay hidden. Do not come out unless I call for you." He touched her cheek, his thumb brushing away a smudge of dirt. It was a goodbye, though neither said the word. Then he turned and vanished into the shadows of his own home, moving to reclaim his throne. The library doors were closed, but the sound of laughter drifted into the hallway. It was a sickening sound, the sound of vultures picking over a carcass before it was even dead. Roman Sterling stood by the fireplace, holding a crystal tumbler of Adrian's rarest scotch. He was younger than Adrian, with the same dark hair, but none of the hard-earned presence. He looked like a copy of a copy, blurred and weak. "To the future," Roman toasted, raising his glass toward Victor Hale, who was lounging in Adrian's leather chair like he owned the place. "To the end of the Sterling arrogance," Hale replied, his voice oily. "With Adrian gone, the city is ours to divide, Roman. You will have your title. I will have the shipping routes." "And the boy?" Roman asked, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. "The boy is a loose end," Hale said dismissively. "My men are at the safe room door. Once the drill arrives, it will be over quickly." The double doors exploded inward with a deafening crash. Adrian Sterling stepped into the room. He was covered in mud, blood soaking his left side, looking like a demon crawled out of the grave. The room froze. Roman dropped his glass, the crystal shattering on the hearth. "You seem surprised, brother." Adrian's voice was low, filling the room with terrified silence. "Did you think a car crash would be enough?" "Adrian," Roman stammered, backing away until he hit the mantel. I was told you were dead. You were misinformed." Adrian raised his rifle, leveling it at Hale's chest. "Get out of my chair, Victor." The 6 mercenaries in the room raised their weapons, aiming at Adrian. Silas appeared in the doorway behind Adrian, his twin pistols drawn, but the numbers were impossible. "Put the guns down," Adrian roared. "Shoot him!" Roman screamed, panic cracking his voice. "Shoot him now!" "Wait!" Victor Hale held up a hand. He didn't look scared. He looked amused. "Adrian, look at you. You're bleeding out. You have 1 man. We have an army." "I have enough bullets for you," Adrian promised. "Perhaps," Hale smirked. "But do you have enough for your son?" Adrian froze. Hale pulled a radio from his pocket. "My men are at the safe room. One word from me, and they breach. Drop the rifle, Adrian, or the Sterling line ends tonight." The silence stretched, agonizing and thick. Adrian looked at Roman, his own flesh and blood, who was watching with a pathetic, desperate hope that his brother would surrender. Slowly, agonizingly, Adrian lowered the rifle. He placed it on the floor. Silas, following his lead, holstered his pistols. "Smart choice," Hale sneered. "Check them for other weapons." 2 guards moved forward, roughly patting Adrian down, kicking his legs apart. Roman let out a shaky laugh, retrieving his pistol from the table. He walked over to Adrian, emboldened now that the lion was declawed. "You always thought you were untouchable," Roman spat, aiming the gun at Adrian's forehead. "But you were just lucky. And luck runs out." Adrian stared down the barrel of the gun. He didn't look at Roman. He looked past him, toward the hidden seam in the wallpaper where the service corridor was. "Now, Clara," he thought. "Now." Total darkness slammed into the room. The heavy thud of the main breaker, killing the power, was followed instantly by chaos. The library was pitched into absolute, suffocating blackness. "What happened?" Roman shrieked. "Get the lights! Where is he? Don't shoot! You'll hit me!" In the dark, Adrian Sterling didn't need eyes. He knew the distance from the rug to the fireplace. He knew exactly where Roman was standing. He lunged. A sickening crunch echoed as Adrian's fist connected with Roman's jaw. The gun clattered across the floor. Silas moved like a wraith. 2 distinct gunshots flashed in the dark, muzzle flares illuminating the room for a split second like strobe lights. 2 mercenaries dropped. "Door! Watch the door!" Hale yelled, his voice trembling now. Adrian ignored the guards. He moved toward the sound of Hale's voice. He tackled the older man, crashing into the heavy oak desk. They grappled in the dark, overturning a lamp, papers flying everywhere. Hale fumbled for a knife, but Adrian caught his wrist. "You wanted my city," Adrian growled in the dark, twisting Hale's arm until the bone snapped. "You can have the gutter." He slammed Hale's head against the desk, silencing him. Suddenly the emergency lights flickered on, a dim red wash that bathed the room in a sinister glow. The scene was a tableau of violence. Roman was unconscious on the floor. Hale was groaning, slumped over the desk. 3 mercenaries were down. The remaining 3 looked at Adrian, who stood in the center of the carnage, bruised, bleeding, but holding Roman's pistol. Silas stood by the door, aiming at the remaining guards. "Drop them," Adrian whispered, "or die now." The mercenaries looked at their fallen paymasters. They looked at the king who refused to die. Clattering sounds filled the room as submachine guns hit the floor. Hands went up. Adrian didn't relax. He turned toward the hidden service door. It opened slowly. Clara stepped out. She was shaking, her hand still gripping the brass candlestick. She looked at the blood, the bodies, and then at Adrian. He walked to her. He didn't run. He didn't limp. He walked with purpose. He stopped inches from her, his chest heaving. "You cut the lights," he said, his voice ragged. "I told you," she whispered, tears finally spilling over her lashes. "I'm good under pressure." Adrian dropped the gun. He reached out with blood-stained hands and cupped her face, pulling her to him. The kiss was not gentle. It was a collision of survival, a desperate affirmation of life amidst death. It tasted of iron and rain. Clara melted into him, holding him up as much as he held her. The adrenaline crashed, leaving them both trembling in the red light of the library. "It's over," Adrian murmured against her hair. "They can't hurt us. Not ever again." Clara Dawson's life changed in the span of a single heartbeat. She began her week worrying about rent and ended it as the matriarch of the most powerful family in the city. Her journey from the freezing Hudson River to the blood-soaked library of the Sterling estate is a testament to the fact that bravery isn't about having power. It's about what you do when you have none. She didn't just save a boy. She saved a father who had forgotten how to trust. And in return, she found a love that was as dangerous as it was undeniable. Now, I have a question for you. If you were in Clara's shoes, would you have cut the lights and stayed to fight? Or would you have taken the money and run to Paris? It's a harder choice than it seems. Let me know your strategy in the comments below. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit the like button. Share this video with your fellow romance thriller lovers and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. We have plenty more stories of danger, passion, and betrayal coming your way. Thanks for watching.